just start off with your name and then tell us where you were born and where you grew up.
My full name is George Earl Gray. I was born at 6029 Cedar Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
In
On
your parents' home?
uh, yes, yes.
Hmm.
The building is no longer there. They were destroyed in a conflagration, perhaps 8 or 10 years ago. And this was on the 29th of March, 1915. When I was a few months old, we moved to the town of Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia. It's a college town, population perhaps 10,000 at that time. And we lived there until August 1921, when we moved to the town of Holmes, which was a few miles closer to Philadelphia.
And you went to high school in Holmes?
No, no. We moved to Holmes where I was 6.5 years old, went to elementary school through 8th grade, and then I went to high school in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania, which is 3 or 4 miles from Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
I walked every day for years, 4 years. I graduated from the high school in 1934, and the first time I could find a job, this is the middle of the Depression. A friend of mine was quitting a job at a dairy where he worked for a farmer named I forget.
It's okay.
He, I used to have to be at work at 3 a.m. In order to get there, I had to ride a bus for about 15 minutes and get off and walk about nearly a mile to the dairy, Reed's Dairy.
Mm-hmm.
And
There were about 5 months worth of battles on their way to the Bulge, and in one of those skirmishes or battles, you ended up getting a small piece of shrapnel hit your stomach. Is that right?
oh yeah,
That was uh, that was while you were moving towards Belgium
uh,
or in Belgium.
we were in Germany at the time.
Oh.
We've had, as you said, several battles along the way, and we got about 20 miles inside of Germany, and the Battle of the Bulge and the Ardennes started. And we moved south, the 3rd Army Division moved south to meet the Germans, which we did.
And the battle actually took place near Christmas time. Did it last for a week? How many?
Oh, that's about a month.
Oh, okay.
Before we regained the initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was long gone by that time.
Yeah.
Uh,
The battle actually started a few days before Christmas.
16th of December.
Okay.
A massive attack by the Germans, and they started to overrun American positions,
Mm-hmm.
and they kept advancing and advancing. And that's when we moved down into the attack.
Mm-hmm.
So well, actually, I was overrun about the 23rd of December, and 4 men with me. We were trying to set up a roadblock. One of the men was shot. We tried to take care of him. By that time, the Germans were all around us, and they took us away, and we marched east to where the German lines were, and had many days of privation, no food, cold, but we survived.
And from there, you had to march from there and take trains and work your way towards Germany. And you actually had your 30th birthday. It was on your way to your prison camp. Is that right?
Yeah, in southern Germany. It happened that it was my 30th birthday. The Germans had marched us south, headed for a camp called Moosburg, and we had been in a camp near Hammelburg, and we had a task force come from west that attacked the camp, and then the task force of General Patton was wiped out, and the Germans had to evacuate the camp, and they started marching us south. And as I said, this was about the time of my 30th birthday, and it was shortly after that that I got away from the Germans and made my way back to Paris. And I was there a couple of days when the war ended.
So, and this was May of 1945?
May 8th, 1945.
And you were in Stalag 13B?
Auflag 13B.
Auflag.
That's a technical point.
Okay. Because it was an officer's camp?
Yeah.
And while you're in Paris, did you manage to get a change of clothes? And how long had you been in those clothes that you were?
When I was in Paris, I had no money, no clothes. I was wearing the same thing for 6 months. And I met an officer there that I had worked with in Fort Knox. And he offered to get me uniforms and money if I wanted it, if I wanted to stay a few days in Paris. I thanked him, but I said, I've had enough, I'm ready to go home. So the next day...
So you took a hospital ship back to the States?
Yeah, I went up to Le Havre. I got a boat, this hospital ship, back to the States, arriving about the 3rd of June. And from there, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and then to home.
Was there anyone to meet the boat at all? I mean, there was no ticker tape or anything, but no kind of welcome home at all.
There was a band that played.
Yeah.
But this was about midnight.
Oh. Well, it's kind of tough when you come in that late.
So, in effect, we were just another ship about this time.
Okay. And then from there you went home.
Uh-huh.
And they gave you 30 days leave, huh? And 10 days of R&R.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Doesn't sound like very much, actually. And then you went back from there to Camp Croft?
Camp Croft, South Carolina, yes.
And you actually left the service at that point, soon thereafter.
Yes. In September of 1946, I was eligible for discharge, so I got out of the service at that time and went back home to Drexel Hill.
And you were working at General Chemical again?
I went back to work at General Chemical, doing pretty much the same thing I was doing before I had left. 2 years before, was it? 4 years before.
And then that was 1946?
6.
And then a couple of years later, or actually soon thereafter, David was born.
David was born in March 1946.
Mm-hmm. And you stay there at General Chemical until you got recruited to join back as a first lieutenant again in the service.
In September of 1946, yes. I found out that they were looking for people and I could get back in, and so I did.
Okay. And did you know at that time they were looking for people to go to Japan?
No, I did not. But that was, it was not an option.
Yeah. Was that sound like a good idea to you when they told you were going to be shipped to Japan, or?
Well, no, it meant getting away from the family, see, breaking up the family, and that, I didn't want that.
Right.
I went to Fort Knox
Uh-huh.
first, and I was there, I think, for a month or two. And instead of being a training officer there, which is what I expected to be, they were filling quotas for occupation duty in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So I went there, and I went there in December of 1946.
Now, did you come back to get mother and the two kids, or did they come later?
No, they came there. So mother and the two kids went to live at my sister-in-law Kitty's and Francis' home in at Englewood, California.
Uh-huh.
And then in June, they got instructions to come to Seattle, port of embarkation, and bring a ship, get on a ship to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And they got there in early June of 1947.
So you were there almost a year before?
6 months.
6 months before they came.
Or January 47 to June 47.
Okay. And so you were in the occupied forces in Tokyo,
Yeah.
and then Cindy was born,
In September 1948.
and soon thereafter you went back to Washington
Yeah.
for a short stint.
Yes. Less than a year when the Korean War broke out. And so Ellen and the kids had to go back to her sister's place in Glen Ridge, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go to Japan with an amphibious tank and tractor battalion where we trained.
In preparation for the Korean War.
The Korean War was underway, and they were trying to see where we could best be used because we were a specialized type of
Unit.
unit, yeah.
Okay. And then Mom and the kids came out later.
First of January 1952. So we were separated then a year and a half. Came back to Japan. Second time we lived, a place called Hayama, which is south, no, correction, which is west of Yokohama. And Eric was born. And the following August, we left Japan and came back to the United States, to Baltimore, Maryland.
Where you were part of the recruiting station there?
I was in one of the people in a recruiting station. I was not in charge of it.
Okay. And you were in Baltimore, and then Robbie was born in 1956.
Right.
And then you were assigned to Johns Hopkins at that point?
Yes.
A few years later as an ROTC instructor.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
I worked 4 years ROTC duty, then I had to go overseas to Saudi Arabia for a year. This would have been December 1959.
And you taught the Saudis small arms use and that sort of thing?
Yeah. I came back from there in December 1960. I was assigned to California Army National Guard advisor in Bakersfield, California.
So you were home for a couple of months and then went to
About a
Bakersfield?
month,
And then went to Bakersfield, and then the family joined you in June.
June of 1961.
And we actually drove across country. You came back and we all drove cross country.
Yeah,
And you retired in Bakersfield 1962
October 1st, 1962, yes,
after 21 years.
approximately.
And then from there you went to work at the post office
I went to work for post office in Bakersfield,
with an exciting job of
mail clerk
mail clerk,
for 2 years.
sorting mail essentially,
Yeah,
and then night shift there actually,
yeah,
because that's the only job you could get at the time. And then went to work for Kern County.
yes, the Auditor Controller's Office of Kern County in November 1964. And I worked there until December 1978.
And during that time, you went to school at Bakersfield College and got a
Yeah.
AA degree.
Yes.
Was that just a general AA or a business mostly, or?
It was a
Ge-
general AA.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I was in accounting courses.
Okay. And then since you retired, you've traveled extensively. You ended up moving to Texas in July of 1987
Correct.
to Wichita Falls.
For 2 years.
And then you moved to Austin. When was that?
March 1st, 1990.
So you've been there for almost 3 years now.
Nearly 3 years, yes.
Okay. That's kind of a tracking briefly your life, but tell me what name of your mother and father, and if your father worked for a living, and did your mother have a job as well, and what were their full names? Let's start with that.
My father's named Frederick James Gray. He was born in Manchester, England, on April the 10th, 1878. The family came to America in 1890. And they settled in Philadelphia. My mother's name was Sadie Holmes Tracy. She was born in Philadelphia, as were her parents and grandparents. And I don't know anything about them. My father worked, one place he worked was a company that was manufacturing gasoline engines. And it was only for a few years when he had a chance for a job with the Pennsylvania Railroad. And that was considered a plum because it was steady work. And at this time he was married on November the 5th, 1906.
And what about your father's father and mother? Do you know anything about them?
The only thing I know about my father's mother and father, they too were born in England. They came to the States. His father worked in a textile mill, and his mother was a homemaker, and there were about 5 children that I know of. His father, I think, was a textile worker, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I know very little about them. I never knew them. They died before I was born, in their early 60s.
And your father's sister married in Altamus? Was that the...
Yeah, my father's sister, Aunt Elsie, married an Altamus, which is a prominent family at that time. But the man she married turned out to be, I'll use the term, the black sheep of the family. And he deserted his family after a few years. And his family was the publishers, owners of the Ultimate Publishing Company in Philadelphia, which became the Winston Publishing. And at a later date, I think it was Houghton Mifflin.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had mentioned to me that your father's father was actually a butcher and a lay minister, or
My mother's father.
your mother's father, okay. Was a butcher and a lay minister for the Methodist Church.
Right.
And do you know how many children they had, your mother's father, or?
Let's see, as I said, my father's families were about 5.
Right.
My mother's had about 9 or 10 children.
Wow.
At least half of them did not live to maturity.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They all lived in the Philadelphia area.
And then what about your brothers and sisters?
Now I have,
The oldest down to the youngest.
all right, we have, our family had 5 boys and 3 girls. The oldest, Iva, died recently. She was 83. She